I thought I was dating a Prince Charming, but then he tried to poison me at his sister's wedding. It's been a little over a year since Michael and I started dating. He's the son of the pastor at our church, and everyone in town seems to think he's some kind of Prince Charming. I'm not sure what they see in him, but I guess everyone has different tastes. My family, especially, thought I was lucky to be dating him. He was a pastor's son, after all, and everyone always expects pastors' kids to be good people. It made my mom so happy to have one more Christian kid in our family. It felt like everyone, except for me, thought that things were going perfectly. Last week was his sister's wedding, and he asked me to be a bridesmaid. I was kind of surprised since we hadn't been together that long, but I thought it was his way of getting to know me better. He said it was a good idea because I'm bi, and he wanted to include me and his family. I didn't really like the idea, and we ended up arguing about it. The truth was, it just felt a little too early to be a bridesmaid. It just felt like we weren't close enough for me to be so close with his family. He was acting as if he was my boyfriend, and I felt like I was already his girlfriend in everyone else's eyes. But we were still pretty new, and I didn't feel ready for that kind of commitment. He ignored my texts for days after that. He never tried to apologize for making me feel bad about disagreeing with him. It was strange because I had thought that being the pastor's son meant he would be more understanding. But I guess everyone has their faults. The day before the wedding, he finally messaged me to ask what time he needed to pick me up. He was worried about what people would say if we didn't show up together. He always worried about what people thought. He always cared more about other people's opinions than about what I thought. It was a pattern and a kind of controlling behavior that I tried to ignore at first. I didn't know if it was just his nature or if it was something that he did intentionally. I hoped that as we got closer he'd loosen up and get used to me. But he didn't. I felt like the only one who was being treated badly by him. On the way to the wedding, he didn't talk to me much. He barely spoke to me at all. I really think he felt the need to act as if everything was fine when it wasn't. The wedding itself was alright, but when we got to the reception, he tried to get me to eat a coconut cream cake. He even knew that the cake had a coconut filling and, because it was made by the same bakery, I mentioned to him at some point that he shouldn't let me eat their cake because I'm allergic to coconut. But as soon as he was done chatting with other people, he walked right up to me and grabbed the cake off the table. I took a few bites. That's when my stomach started to feel strange, but I thought I was just nervous because I don't like to speak in front of groups and I had given a speech right before. I had to stand up and let everyone know that I didn't feel well. It was an awful moment. I was embarrassed and people kept asking if I was alright. My lips started to swell. It wasn't long before I had to be rushed to the hospital. It turns out, I was having a bad allergic reaction. I can't believe how fast it came on. I didn't feel great for a few hours leading up to that, but that was a total surprise. When I woke up, someone was looking for Michael, but he had left with some friends to go to a bar. That's when it finally occurred to me. Michael gave me the cake knowing I had a coconut allergy. I've always had it, since I was a little girl. He has always known about it. How could I have been so foolish? When I got back home from the hospital, I called Michael to ask him to pick me up, but he didn't answer. My best friend stayed with me that night to make sure I was okay. The next morning, he left me a message screaming at me, saying that I ruined his sister's wedding and that I always have to make things about myself. His messages were really hateful. His sister called me later that day to tell me that she had spoken to Michael after the reception. His sister was angry and worried because it was clear that Michael was in the wrong. She had apologized to me and told me she was so sorry that things had turned out that way. She said that when she found out that Michael had left the wedding with some friends, she went looking for him and she gave him an earful. She also told me she was shocked that Michael acted like it was all my fault, because she felt that he really did do a bad thing. Then, Michael came over and yelled at me some more. He said we should just break up because I'm dramatic and too much. At that moment, it became clear to me that I would need to get out of that relationship. He made it sound as if I was the one who was out of line and unreasonable, but I knew the truth. He said that he had gone to that bar to let off steam after the stress of the wedding, but that excuse wasn't good enough. What I needed from him was for him to take responsibility, and to make sure that this never happened again. I told him that he knew about my coconut allergy. He had gotten me the plate of food himself. Even his sister told me later that he knew the cake he gave me was the coconut cake. I wasn't the only person at the wedding with allergies. All the food had labels showing what it was and what was in it. It was crazy to me that he pretended not to remember. It was all a clear indication to me that he wasn't ready to admit that he'd done something wrong, and it made me feel so alone. Michael just stormed out saying that he couldn't talk to me when I'm like this. I was exhausted, so I didn't even try to get in touch with him. He was the pastor's son, and he seemed to be so popular. It just didn't feel like he would understand me, even if he said he did. But his dad called me to ask how I was doing. He seemed kind and concerned. It was different from how Michael acted. I'm so glad I didn't block his father's number. After I answered, he started talking about how I was hurting Michael by blaming him, and that Michael had been upset since we fought. He wasn't trying to make excuses for him, but he seemed concerned that their relationship wasn't strong. He kept asking me to give Michael another chance. He didn't blame me for being upset or angry, and I was so relieved to know that his dad wasn't just another one of those people who would automatically believe his son without question. I tried to talk to Michael, but somehow the conversation always ended up back on the topic of threesomes and how I don't respect him. I don't know what he was talking about. I can't believe that he made this issue about me. He made it feel like my need to wait to be in a committed relationship with him was something that was holding him back. That wasn't the truth. I don't think it had anything to do with me at all. I just don't think he knew how to deal with the guilt of getting caught for acting badly. It was obvious that he had done something really wrong, and instead of accepting responsibility, he had to try and find another excuse to avoid getting into trouble. Honestly, I think it's all a big manipulation. I respect Michael's father a lot because he's the pastor at our church, so it was shocking to have him tell me that I was in the wrong. I thought for sure that Michael's dad would understand, but I guess you never know how anyone is going to react. I guess people can get caught up in believing the people they love even when it's not the truth. It was crazy to hear from his father that I was the one who had done something wrong. I wanted to call my best friend right then, but I was at church and there was no way I could do it. I thought I should keep talking to Michael's father. A lot of people have said that maybe Michael intentionally gave me something I was allergic to. It never even crossed my mind before, but the more I think about it, the more it makes sense. It seems like he always wants to do things his way, even if it means hurting me. After all, what kind of person does something like that on purpose? I knew he did, but it didn't feel real for a long time. Even if I didn't think it was true at the time, the more I think about it, the more it makes sense that he did it intentionally. I've been talking to my best friend, and she reminded me of all the times I got sick after arguing with him. There was one time, right after we started dating, where I was sick for a whole week with a stomach bug. He made me soup while I was in bed, but something didn't feel right about it. I was so sick and tired of being sick. But it was good that he stayed by my side even if he was kind of grumpy, and when he went to the store he got the food that I like, which made me happy. It made me feel like we were really together, even though we were only a few weeks into our relationship. That's when I started thinking it could be something that happened because he thought I was acting strangely. I felt like I had to start paying attention, and started looking for clues. Then, there was this other time where he wanted to start using labels in our relationship way too early, but I didn't want to. That really bothered him. I think it made him feel like I didn't respect him and trust him, but it was just the opposite. I loved him and I did trust him, but he never gave me a reason to be his girlfriend. I wasn't ready to be anyone's girlfriend after the last relationship. The next morning, I woke up with chest pain and stomach cramps. I really feel like something isn't right. It just seemed too much like he was making me sick as punishment, even though I wasn't sure it was real. It didn't even feel like he was mad at me when I talked about why I didn't want to go through with his requests, which just seemed strange to me. The other day, he came over to apologize. He even bought me flowers and wrote a long letter. I've never really been into flowers, but I had to admit that he's never really bought me flowers before, so it was kind of nice. I've heard people talk about the fact that you can never really tell how a guy feels about a woman unless he buys her flowers, but I've never really cared much about that. I just don't understand men. But his apology was more of an excuse. He just said, if I hurt you, or that you're feeling X or Y feeling, not really taking responsibility. It felt as if he didn't understand how much he had hurt me. He said he had repented for being careless. I felt like it was all a big act. There was a moment when it seemed like he was going to say what really happened, but he just stopped himself and didn't get specific. I knew that if he had really changed, he would have admitted that he gave me the coconut cake. He did say how much his family loved me and how much everyone at the church supported us. I had tried so hard to convince myself that I was good enough, but those comments really showed me just how much I was trying to live up to their expectations. It just wasn't something I wanted to keep doing. Then, I finally realized something. I had let things slide for so long because he's the pastor's son. Everyone in town expects a lot from him because he's basically the Prince Charming. I think that's why I always gave him a second chance. He knew that I would be more likely to forgive him because he had such a strong social standing. It made it so much easier for him to act as if nothing bad had ever happened, even if it had. It hit me like a brick wall. He could never accept responsibility for his actions because he was so used to getting what he wanted. He would never admit he was wrong. I needed someone who was honest, and someone who was going to admit he was wrong and be willing to fix what he did. But that didn't feel like him. I finally had to put my foot down. I told him I was done. His eyes widened and he looked shocked and confused. The truth was, I could not stand the idea of dating him anymore. I was tired of getting sick, and I was done being controlled. It was then that he said that he's just going to wait for me to grow up and learn to accept his apology. I've heard that so many times before, but it's never felt as true as it does right now. He loves saying things that hurt me to try to control me. It makes me think that maybe he's been purposely making me sick to punish me for disagreeing with him. I just don't know anymore. His dad is disappointed that I wouldn't wait for him until Sunday at church so he could pray and heal. I'm done letting people use religion as a weapon against me. The God I believe in isn't cruel or judgmental, he's loving and kind. That's not the same God that Michael and his dad seem to believe in. They believe in a God who controls everyone's choices. But I don't believe in that God. It's not like I'm begging to go back to the church. They told me I wasn't welcome until I reconcile with Michael and show compassion and respect for the leaders. But why would I? I can't even think about it. I am not going to make the same mistakes as before, and I am definitely not going to listen to someone who is trying to hurt me and act like he is doing the right thing. It feels good to know I'm finally free. It feels so much better to know that I can actually get some peace for the first time in a really long time. I can go to sleep tomorrow without worrying about what Michael might do next. I can finally eat coconut again. There's not much else to say. I'm going to focus on myself for a while. I can't believe that I let this all happen, but it was all so new at the time and I felt like it was my fault. I am going to make sure that the next time I fall in love, it is with someone who loves and respects me. It's hard to think about that now, but I'm going to focus on being happy. I'm so much better off without Michael, and I need to be alone so I can learn how to be happy on my own. I wish everyone else could feel this good, too. I think we all deserve to be happy. I wish that I had known better, but I guess sometimes the hardest lessons come when we're in the middle of trying to make something work that is clearly not for us. Oh yeah, and Michael, if you're reading this, and I know you are, I want you to know this. I hope you never find a pair of socks that stays perfectly dry in the dryer again. You know why? That's for making me feel like you didn't understand my need to be cautious. I hope that it's more than just socks though. I want you to know that this whole thing is not over yet. This is a story that will never end. It will go down in history as a reminder that not every nice person is really that nice, and that even if a boy wears nice clothes and acts nice, it doesn't mean he's worth having around. By the way, I sent screenshots of some of our texts to his dad, and all he said was that I'm missing out on a great guy. He actually said something like, "Your body makes me sick, but my love for you is stronger." I mean, come on. You can't tell me he has no idea that Michael intentionally made me sick. He's clearly trying to make me feel like I'm not good enough. He's trying to make me think that all I will ever have is Michael. He's trying to manipulate me, and that is so not cool. It just made it clear to me that I was right to leave, even though they would all probably pretend like I did the wrong thing. I really wonder if his father is that blinded by religion that he just can't see the bad side of his son. It's hard to believe that his father actually thought the loving thing to do is let his son potentially endanger my health. He even seems to enjoy that. It's like a game to him. He enjoys thinking about that. He's excited to see what will happen. He's not going to tell the truth, and that makes it more important than ever to talk about these things so that others don't have to go through the same thing that I have. And people online are saying I could send him to jail. If only I could prove it. It's so hard to believe this happened, especially when it seems like everything about him was perfect before we started dating. It was like a fairy tale when we first met. It's so sad, really. I feel like he's always been trying to win over people's hearts, and it really shows when they actually do believe him, even if they're not entirely certain. It was nice, but I know now that it was all just a big act. I'm glad I'm done with him, but it hurts so much to know that I had to go through all of this. He used the fact that he's a pastor's son, and that people always want to be around him and his family to try and make me look like a crazy person. That's why it's important for me to say all of this. I want everyone to know that they're not alone when they're experiencing something that doesn't feel right. There's always hope. I'm still hurting, and I'm angry that this all happened. And I really want people to know that it's not okay to think someone is above the law because they have money or social influence. No one is above the law. And when people try to act like they are, we need to hold them accountable for their actions. But I'm trying to focus on myself and the future. I hope all of you find your happy endings. I know I'll be okay eventually, and I know you all will be, too.